Well, good afternoon, everyone. Happy National Wildflower Week and welcome to our Save Our Roadsides webinar. I'm Lisa Roberts, Executive Director of the Florida Wildflower Foundation. We've timed this webinar to coincide with our National Wildflower Week in order to celebrate the official launch of the North Florida Wildflower Alliance. It costs nothing to be a member of this informal group, and when you exit the webinar, you'll learn more about how you can join. If you're new to our organization, we protect, connect, and expand wildflower habitats throughout the state through our education, research, and planting projects. And you can find out more about our work and a lot more information on wildflowers on our website at flawildflowers.org. And this is brought to you by the State Wildflower License State, whether you have this old look or the new one. You are funding research, education, and planting projects across the state. So a few little housekeeping things before we start. All our attendees are muted with their cameras off. This webinar is going to be recorded and it will be available about 24 hours from now on youtube.com/FLA Wildflowers and also on our website, flawildflowers.org. You can submit any questions you might have during the presentation, and questions will be answered at the end if time permits. So if your question isn't answered, you can email us at info@flawildflowers.org and we'll do our best to answer it. So thank you for your interest in Roadsides, and we've got a great lineup of speakers today. First is Dr. Jaret Daniels, who will share why roadside vegetation matters. Then we'll have Gina Hill and Liz Sparks, who are our representatives in North Florida and the Panhandle. They'll share how you can help conserve roadside wildflowers. After that, we'll hear from Neil Bradshaw of Alachua County's Wildflower Program. And then Cindy Trammell of the Florida Department of Transportation will share information about FDOT's North Florida Wildflower Program, which includes planting both native and non-native species. So we're going to begin with Jaret, and it's always my pleasure to introduce him. Jaret is a University of Florida Associate Professor of Entomology and Director of the McGuire Center for Lepidoptera and Biodiversity at the Florida Museum of Natural History. His research focuses on insect ecology, population biology, and conservation, with emphasis on butterflies and other native pollinators. He has authored more than 50 scientific papers, articles, and books on butterflies, conservation, and wildlife landscaping, including a field guide called Wildflowers of Florida. Thanks for being here, Jaret.
Thank you, Lisa, and it's really a pleasure to be here today. And I'm going to kick off today's webinar really with a subject dear and near to my heart, which is why roadsides matter. Next slide. So I came down to Florida and did my graduate work, but before that I grew up in rural Wisconsin, and as a kid interested in the great outdoors and entomology, roadsides were a fantastic place to go to see relic prairie plants and an abundance of different insects. And of course, when I came down to Florida, I was greeted with roadsides like this outside of Newberry, just ablaze with coreopsis and phlox and all sorts of other types of wildflower species. So since I arrived in Gainesville, I was always very interested in how do we mobilize these sort of non-traditional spaces to have more benefit for conservation. Because they do offer a lot of opportunity, and they are, after all, perpetually managed landscapes. Next slide. Next slide, please, Lisa.
I'm working on it.
Sorry.
It's being stubborn again. Thank you.
So I think we all know that roadsides are really an amazing global network of transportation, and estimates are that about 36 million kilometers of roadways exist globally, and that figure is probably a little bit outdated, but it's still a staggering figure. And within the US, roadsides and road verges collectively occupy about 0.5% of all land. So that's a tremendous arena of conservation spaces that could be mobilized to enhance our world, conserve small species, provide beautification, and be managed in a way that provides a lot of potential benefit. And of course, ecologists have known this for some time, and with the advent of road ecology as a field of study, kind of the early part of the research focused on the negative effects of roadways to wildlife and the broader environment. But more recently, in the last several decades, that focus has switched a bit to look at roadsides as an opportunity for preserving biodiversity, for enhancing ecosystem services, for providing other benefits to the built environment in which humans and wildlife can coexist. And the picture on the right-hand side of the slide is from a recent review, and I think it's really well done because it does show the inputs and outputs of kind of how roads interact with natural areas, with urban areas, and also with agricultural areas. And you can see some of the negative effects, such as heavy metal pollution, noise, pollution in general, but you can also see highlighted in red some of the key benefits that roadways provide to biodiversity, including air filtration, water filtration, and bioremediation, global climate regulation, aesthetic value, habitat movement corridors, and the list goes on and on. And as we know more about these types of spaces, we realize the benefits of managing such roadway landscapes for the benefit of biodiversity. Next slide. And here are a few recent papers, and I provided some quotes from them because I like the synopsis that they've offered. And so I'm just going to read a few of these. Road verges offer a significant opportunity to mitigate the negative ecological effects of roads and to address demand for ecosystem services in urban and agricultural landscapes. Roadsides can be excellent reservoirs of biodiversity. And of course, as we know, for flowering plants and particularly for insects, because they're small and they don't need a lot of space to be happy, road verges are often hotspots for that remaining parcel of biodiversity, whether it be relic plant communities, beautification, common plants, uncommon plants, and an assortment of different insects that provide a wealth of different ecological services, from pollination to natural pest control and nutrient recycling. And more recently, there is an increasing array of evidence that suggests that the benefits of road verges, particularly to pollinating insects, far outweigh any of the costs that might be afforded, such as the impact of vehicular organism collisions, the effect of pollution, salt, other negative effects. So there's a growing body that shows that roads really are quite impactful to the insect and flowering plant community. And more often, they can additionally be enhanced or managed through strategic management to amplify these effects on biodiversity. Next slide. And I think we probably all have seen highlighted in the last at least couple of years, papers from the New York Times on down to Science, the growing body of evidence that shows that insect decline is real. It's a global issue, and particularly for well-known species such as butterflies and moths and bees, there's significant evidence that these insects are in a pretty significant decline globally. And of course, this is worrisome from a conservation point of view because of the wealth of ecosystem services that they provide. And recent conservation attention has been focused on ways that we can mobilize particularly all landscapes, not just conservation lands, not just agricultural landscapes, but the wealth of landscapes within the built environment, from suburban and urban landscapes to road verges and utility easements. Next slide. And I love this particular paper illustration because it really gets at the ways in which insect populations and biodiversity as a whole is threatened. So we all know that habitat loss and fragmentation is probably one of the main drivers of decline globally, but it really is a death by 1,000 cuts. So everything from introduced species, insecticide use, pollution, urbanization, nitrification, fire, global climate change, it really affects species and systems in a way that is hard to mediate. And it is really a death by 1,000 cuts. So the utility of looking at non-traditional spaces such as roadways makes these ever more important landscapes when it comes to conservation. And particularly, as I mentioned earlier, for small species like insects, which don't need a lot to be happy, but nonetheless are mobile. And the impact of roadways on the surrounding environment can also be quite important, because as insects forage within these landscapes, they move to natural areas, they move to urban spaces, and they of course move to agricultural landscapes. Next slide. And we've been working with the Department of Transportation in Florida for quite some time, looking at the effect of management on insect and flowering plant communities. And we concluded a study a few years ago looking at how mowing frequency affected flowering plant abundance and insect diversity and abundance along roadways in Alachua County, Florida. And not surprisingly, we realized at the end of the study that roadways are incredibly diverse spaces, right? That they have a lot of different flowering plant species. Over the course of our 3-year study, we recorded 133 different species of herbaceous flowering plants in 42 families. So these are rich reservoirs of biodiversity. And in many cases, they harbor plant communities or particular species of plants that are no longer found in adjacent conservation lands because management may not be appropriate on those landscapes, such as the reduction of fire as an example. So roadways, because they are mowed, often mimic that level of disturbance that's appropriate for maintaining those plant communities. And we evaluated 3 different types of mowing frequency: no mowing every 3 weeks, which was the norm in Alachua County, and every 3 weeks, twice the norm. And what we found through this study, in addition to recording 11 different orders of insects in 147 families, we found that just slight reduction in mowing frequency had very significant impact. So as you go from 3 weeks to 6 weeks, we saw a significant increase in the amount of flowering plant abundance and a similar increase in the abundance and diversity of flower visiting insects that utilize those rights of way. So managing appropriately for biodiversity does not mean stopping mowing. It does not mean costly management actions. It just means tweaking the system so we can have broader benefits for all of biodiversity. Next slide. And that impact, when you look at, as an example, pollinating insects on the surrounding environment, we know that these are mobile insects. They can forage over kilometers as they move through landscapes, urban, suburban, natural landscapes, but also roadways bisect and go adjacent to all major cropping systems in Florida. And the impact of pollination, particularly insect pollination to Florida agriculture, is estimated at about 1.12 billion annually. That's a major impact on the Florida economy, the second largest economy in Florida, second only to tourism. And as the diversity of crops continues to expand, insect pollination services will continue to play a major role. But it is a driver of this economy, it's a driver of jobs, and it's a driver of making sure that Florida cropping systems are competitive globally. Next slide. And of course, we also know that roadways are important to key species. And there's been a lot of attention over the last couple of decades about the decline of monarch populations, both in the West and in the East. And in the West, as an example, less than 1% of the historic size of population exists to the west of the Rocky Mountains. It's essentially functionally extinct. And in the Eastern population, that has declined over the last 20 years by about 84 to 85%. So this once ubiquitous common butterfly has shown significant declines over the last 2 decades. And it is arguably the most iconic and well-known insect in North America. So it has become the poster child for pollinator conservation as a whole, looking at all landscapes, including roadways. Next slide. And so we, again, teamed up with the Florida Department of Transportation, and they funded a study having us survey roadsides for mapping 2 different species of milkweed, Asclepias tuberosa butterfly weed, the bright orange species, and this particular milkweed, sandhill milkweed, Asclepias humistrata. And not surprisingly, roadways are actually really good repositories of these two specific milkweeds. Both are critically important to the remigration of the monarch into Florida at the beginning of the spring and for supporting that first full generation of monarchs before they continue to expand their dispersal northward and eventually repopulate much of the eastern seaboard. Next slide. And so we looked at all roadways from Jacksonville to Tallahassee down to Ocala, many, many kilometers of roadways. And the roadways highlighted in blue on this slide support good populations of both of those species of milkweed, butterfly weed and pine woods milkweed. The areas highlighted in red have ultra high densities of milkweed. So these would be prime locations if, as an example, the Department of Transportation wished to reduce mowing in these sites to enable monarchs to effectively recolonize these locations in early spring and to have them support monarch breeding populations and ultimately have the plants produce seeds so these populations can proliferate and grow over time and not become ecological sinks. And in the course of our surveys, as you can see on the lower right-hand side of the slide, these milkweed populations were well utilized by monarchs along roadways. And in many cases, for some populations of milkweeds, roadways are some of the only remaining locations that some rarer species of milkweeds actually occur. In fact, some information from a good colleague of mine in the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service suggests that indeed roadways are critical to these rare species of milkweed. Next slide. And all of this information went back to the Department of Transportation and fed into FDOT joining the nationwide candidate conservation agreement with assurances for the monarch butterflies. It's a horrible name, but it's a wonderful agreement that mobilizes energy and transmission rights away across the nation to adopt management actions that have benefit for the monarch, including brush removal, conservation time mowing, seeding or planting of native wildflowers, and more integrated vegetation management to support milkweed populations and ultimately help the monarch butterfly find usable breeding habitat to both recolonize and also providing nectar during the fall migration. Next slide. And I think we all know that roadways benefit biodiversity in a number of ways, but another critical role that these linear strips of kind of living fragments can provide is that they do connect conservation lands, urban landscapes, and agricultural landscapes. They function as potential movement corridors that are critical, especially in an increasingly urbanized world where insects and other wildlife might find it difficult traversing through a matrix of inhospitable urban development. So they can be particularly critical to support, say, migration of the monarch in the fall or the remigration in the springtime, of helping bees and other critical pollinating insects find their way from one landscape to another. And another critical resource is the fact that these are perpetually managed landscapes. They're never developed, so they can function as true habitat, providing nesting resources, critical forage, and also movement corridors to connect populations to keep them diverse and healthy over time. Next slide. And so to kind of sum up today, my goal is really to try to suggest that we need to turn our way of looking at roadways on its head, to suggest that these are not locations that are waste areas, that these are true assets and should not be looked at as a potential liability, that they should be managed not just to minimize the negative effects on biodiversity or wildlife, but they should be managed to maximize the biodiversity benefits and the ecosystem service benefits for all wildlife and for all biodiversity. And that these benefits, as I mentioned, extend well beyond the border of that road verge into other landscapes, urban, suburban, agricultural. They impact other industries such as agriculture, and they of course feed the economy of Florida, supporting that growing agricultural industry. And all of this, in as far as management goes, does not sacrifice safety, and in many cases saves money for the Department of Transportation. So this is in many ways a no-brainer that we can effectively manage roadways in such a way that significantly benefit all the biodiversity related impacts and have no cost or sacrifice to public safety. And I would make the argument that Florida is extremely well positioned to lead by example throughout the Southeast, that we can be a true model ahead of the curve that other departments of transportation, other states, and other individuals can look at as a significant model for doing things right. So with that, I'll say thank you very much and turn it back over to Lisa.
Thank you, Jaret. Next, we're going to hear from Liz Sparks, who's our Regional Wildflower Alliance liaison. She works up in our Panhandle region. And Gina Hill, who is heading up our effort to form the North Florida Wildflower Alliance. She is our liaison for that region. We're going to talk about programs that we have in place that can help you work with your county and to save these roadside wildflowers.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Ready for the next slide? Yeah, there's a lot of ways that if you are a wildflower advocate and you'd like to get involved in doing some of the conservation work that Jaret just outlined, it's a wonderful opportunity, and we're very excited that you're joining us today in this webinar. And maybe you have some skills and some enthusiasm that can help move a project forward in your county. So there's a procedures that were made in a pilot project up in the Panhandle some years ago in Florida DOT District 3. So there's 16 counties all the way from Escambia County to Jefferson County, just east of Tallahassee, that a procedure was developed so that volunteers and wildflower advocates could go to their local county commission and seek a way to get support for wildflowers to be preserved in the right of way of state and also county roads. So we're going to share some of the tools and a little bit of the procedure, and all this can be found on our Wildflower Foundation website. So the first thing that happens is that there is a wildflower resolution is passed by the Board of County Commissioners in your county. And if you're going after conservation in a state road, that gives DOT assurance that there is support at a local political level. And pretty much we have the tools, we have a resolution that you can just fill in the blanks with your county name, and you can kind of help shepherd it through the Board of County Commissioners and get a wildflower resolution passed. And then each county, we need to have a little team develop, or sometimes it's just one person. It's different in each county, but there needs to be one person who'll step up and be the spokesperson or the leader for the group. And this person will sort of be the liaison or the gatekeeper so that communication flows through that person, whether you're coordinating with DOT for state roads or you're going to your local county local county public works to talk about county roads, and we'll break this down some more. So there also there's wildflower advocates that go out and monitor roadsides. Once we've got a program established, they'll go out and make sure that the wildflower signs are in place and the right of ways are being mowed correctly, and there's not settling invasion of exotic plants, etc. So that's another skill set that's needed, or another volunteer possibility. And then of course public outreach and education. So if you're a good writer or you have good social media skills, there's a lot of ways that you can help participate in spreading the message and helping conserve our roadside wildflowers. Next slide, please. So the first thing to do is look around you and find other wildflower advocates. And maybe you're already a member of the Florida Native Plant Society, or perhaps a University of Florida Master Gardener program. Audubon is another great conservation group. And there's also garden clubs in many counties and towns. So that's important to kind of get a little team together. But the most important thing is to find a good conservation-minded local county commissioner. This will be an important person to help shepherd your request through the process. And also it's different in each county. Some of the smaller rural counties maybe don't have public works. They maybe use contractors to do their roadside mowing. Could be done in-house, but it could be a great mystery. So if you have a local savvy politician who has, conservation in mind, that's a very good person to recruit to get on your team. Okay, next slide. So this is from our foundation website, and you'll see I mentioned we had a model resolution where all you have to do is plug in your county's name pretty much. And you'll see how this map is broken down by the Department of Transportation district. So we have done we've done the work in District 3. Now we're branching out to District 2, where Gina is the new North Florida Wildflower Alliance regional alliance person. So you'll see that these counties are green or yellow. So green means that a resolution was passed. Yellow means that it hasn't happened yet. However, when you go onto our foundation page, you can click onto these green counties and you can see what year a resolution was passed. And perhaps there should be a little outline of the progression of who is the leader of that county and their contact information. But some of it's really old. You may find that a resolution was passed 10 years ago in your county, but nothing ever happened. Like a team didn't really form. And so really no roads were adopted. So it's kind of a gap sometimes. Yes, they did do a resolution, but you may have to kind of just boot this up all over again. So we have the tools for you. We actually have a presentation online. If you need to make a meeting with the commissioners, we have a little PowerPoint you can take to them. We have the letter request if you're requesting a state road with DOT or a county road with your county. So we kind of got all this stuff that you need, and we'll help hold your hand along the way. And our foundation website's fabulous for anything related to wildflowers. There's so much educational material you can request. Handouts, you can print them out, and just endless resources. Anything you want to know about the wildflowers, you can find it there. Next slide, please. So the next step, or one of the steps, and maybe you're not a good botanist yourself, but you can get in touch with some either through nearby university or IFAS or through some the Native Plant Society, find a local chapter. So what we really want to do is focus on naturally occurring wildflower areas. So one thing, when you say you want to start a wildflower program, the first thing people say is like, oh, how much do the seeds cost? Well, actually, that's not our focus. We're trying to go out and identify naturally occurring wildflower areas. And of course, we have a little acronym for it. So a good place to look is adjacent to public conservation lands, because if there's already been a program with prescribed fire and good management, chances are good that that's preserved public lands. There's not a lot of dwellings in there or negative impacts. So it's good to look alongside any kind of public land like state parks, water management district, wildlife management areas, et cetera, et cetera. So some of the other features that make a roadway a good candidate, you don't want to have a lot of driveways or a lot of houses. You don't want to see a lot of invasive species because that's going to be a problem. Don't want to see a lot of ragweed starting to emerge. And you have to have at least 5 to 6 foot of right of way. So some county roads are just not going to be that wide. So that doesn't make them good candidates. All right, next slide, please. And we want you to write up a little report. It doesn't have to be super sophisticated, but we'd like you to identify the endpoints of the roads that you're seeing, whether it's you do it with GPS coordinates is great, or you can describe it from the intersection of state road, blah, 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 to whatever. Give us a rough estimate of the mileage and whether it's on one side of the road or both. And then photos are great. Maybe you can take out some photos here from a Google Earth, Google Maps. And this is a great project. If you're not really technologically savvy yourself, try to recruit. This might be a good project for a student or even a master gardener. So there's, don't be intimidated if you don't really feel you got the skills for this. It's not too difficult. All right, next slide, please. So it's a little bit different in our procedures, a little bit different whether you're requesting reduced mowing on a state road versus a county road. State road, it's going to go through DOT, and that has to be, number one, I mentioned the wildflower resolution. And then you have to have a letter written, and it has to go through your county administrator or public works or whatever your mechanism is in your county. Again, that commissioner will help you with that. So simply we'll give you a template letter and you kind of plug in the endpoints that you generated in a report and you send it to DOT, to the wildflower coordinator, who you're going to meet shortly in District 2. And then DOT will evaluate it, and they'll send out their experts to make sure it's a good idea. And if they give you a thumbs up, they'll go out and they will install the wildflower signs, and they will also notify whoever's responsible for the mowing, whether DOT has their own maintenance yard or whether they have what they call an asset manager and somebody on contract. But it just starts with a resolution and starts with a report, and then you get your letter submitted. Now, if it's on a county road, that could be a little bit different because you're depends on how your structure is in the county. But again, that commissioner will help you with the whole process. And you want to contact Public Works and make sure that they're on board with this, because they're going to be your ally in this as well. So again, you want to just kind of formalize it, make a report, meet them out there by the roadside. I think that's real important to let them, you can solidify what it is you're trying to do. And of course, if you got the commissioners on board, and this will be different in every county. Some counties are so supportive of this, and then some you find some resistance in. So it's a lot of communication happens here. So this is a good skill. This is a good skill need for somebody. Maybe you're not real knowledgeable in botany, but you're perhaps been in the county a long time. You're related to a lot of people or know a lot of people, friends with some commissioners. That's great. That's definitely a strong need to make this work. Okay, next slide, please. So the other thing, when you talk about reduced mowing, once you clarified, no, you're not trying to purchase wildflower seeds, you also say, no, we're not trying to take away your mowing at all. Absolutely not. We still want you to mow. We just want to tweak it a little bit. So this is actually a handout. I laminate this, and when I go meet with the Public Works guy or meet with the mowing crew, I'll show them this just to make sure. It's like there's if you look on the right, you'll see the little circle around what's called a safety strip. And DOT will always, this will always be done on a state road, and that's just policy. That it's just the way it's going to be. And this is what's called the safety strip or the clear zone. And the thinking is that if you lose control of your car, you've got plenty of room to see if there's a culvert or a pole or a bridge or something in there. But what we're aiming at is what we're calling the back slopes. So we're like from the ditch down there where the drainage happens up to the edge of the woods or the fence or whatever the edge of the right of way is. We want to have that mowed only once a year. And that's during the dormant season when everything turns brown. So that would be like December, January, basically from Thanksgiving to Groundhog Day, whatever helps you remember that. Some counties want to have a more manicured look, and they will want to do a midsummer full right-of-way mow. So they want to mow the whole thing twice. And if that works for them and that helps you keep a program or promote a program, the timing is important though. What we try to encourage is that the mowing is done so that it imitates what would be the lightning season or naturally occurring fire, or that would be pretty much in the midsummer. So that can be something that we can help you with as well. If they ask that option, we'll try to help you tweak that in your letter when you submit it to them. So basically you want to approach the county and remember, be very pleasant and patient and persistent, practice the 3 Ps, and be mindful that you're maybe asking them to do something really different. And, you got to just do this very diplomatically and think about we're asking to make them do things differently in their realm. So we have to be very careful how you approach this and how you sell the idea and the concept. I think, okay, next slide, please. Okay, so I mentioned that if the DOT accepts your letter that you sent to them, they'll go back and survey and maybe tweak it a little bit, and then they'll put the signs up. However, the county, you're working with the county, we don't have a template sign, so they'll just design and install their own signs. And this is a good opportunity to contact your local newspaper, go out and take some photos, put it on social media. And it's a really good way to build support for your program. Just let your local population know what's going on and give them some props. I think they like to be applauded for doing something popular. And this is generally a very, very good news kind of feature that your local paper may want to know about, and possibly even, TV stations. So it's a good promotional possibility. And we have examples of wildflower signs too that we can share with your county so they can get some ideas. Next slide, please. So this is your ace in the hole. If you go talk to a county, they're going to be, especially a little county that doesn't have a big budget. This is a letter that we got from the Santa Rosa Board of County Commissioners, and we have a very motivated, wonderful volunteer up there named Suzanne Spencer, who started the wildflower program using our procedure. She did that as a master gardener project and recruited a lot of her colleagues in the program and had a great relationship with the Public Works. And you can see down there that they've conserved about 70 miles of linear habitat along the right of way, just mowing half as much. And it saves about $1,000 per linear mile, or $70,000 over 3 years. It's over $200,000. And when I've gone to talk to Public Works guys, they'll kind of glaze over when I'm using, hey, we like the beauty of wildflowers. We want the pollinators to help agriculture, blah, blah, blah. But when I talk about them saving $70,000 a year, if they get into it, they suddenly turn around and go, oh yeah, I'm in. So this is something, one angle that can definitely get a small county interested, because $70,000 is a big part of the budget. So again, we're not planting wildflowers. We're just mowing less of what we got already. So we're not trying to spend money, we're trying to save money. So this is a really important feature that may get the response and the support that you want from the commissioners and from Public Works. Next slide, please. So this is from our, and again, this is kind of not coming through clearly. Don't know if that's the case for everybody, but this is from our foundation website. We have kind of a step-by-step outline and different approaches and how you can make this work. Also plenty of handouts you can see there on the right. And Gina and I are more than happy to be your just hold your hand all the way through this and give you advice and send you the templates and send you the material that you need, send you the resolution, kind of help you draft a letter, just kind of get through the steps. So we definitely want you to be successful, and we want to share what we can do to help you with that. Next slide, please. And I'm going to turn this over to Gina Hill now. So thank you for the opportunity to share this with you, and please don't hesitate to call me if I can help.
Thanks, Liz. All right, I'm going to talk to you guys a bit about some of the on-the-ground work we're doing with volunteers and other ways that you can participate. So once you have your wildflower resolution established in your county, roads have been designated, your wildflower signs are in place, it's really important to monitor these designated areas for things like invasive species presence, damaged signs, and mowing inconsistencies. And as Liz mentioned, there will typically be a leader of each county team. And so this can be pretty much anyone from your community. We found it's useful to devise a schedule with the volunteers so that each person is assigned a set of roads to monitor. And we typically will monitor every 2 to 3 weeks in the spring and fall. Next slide, please. So I wanted to talk to you about Alachua County, because this is a team that really works well together and I think can be a really great model for other counties. So we're working with Alachua County Public Works, who you'll hear from in a bit, and they're responsible for over 640 miles of paved roads and 240 miles of graded roads in Alachua County. So the Board of County Commissioners passed a wildflower resolution in 2012 to support the conservation of over 405 acres of seeded and naturally occurring wildflowers along roadsides. And specifically with our team of volunteers, I apologize, this slide is not buffering right now. But specifically with our team of volunteers, we have 15 dedicated volunteers that monitor the roads that we've identified throughout Alachua County. Next slide. And in order to monitor these roadsides, we have a couple different tools that we've been using. Lisa, if you could go back one slide, that would be great. Yeah, that's perfect. So one of the tools that we've been using is iNaturalist, which some of you may have heard of. This is really great for documenting and identifying plants. I've set up this project on iNaturalist called Wildflowers of Alachua County. This is open to the public, so any person that takes a photo of a flowering plant and submits their observation on iNaturalist, it will automatically go into this project. And I also wanted to mention that there are ways to obscure your GPS coordinates. So if you find a species that's rare or listed, you can actually obscure the location so that it's not available to the public. Next slide, please. And so our second project here is it's titled the Alachua Wildflower Team. So this basically is specific to our volunteers within Alachua County. And so this one is for project members only. And so basically you have to be a volunteer with the Alachua Wildflower Team and a project member in order to contribute to this project. So This is just basically a really good way to keep track of our team's observations without having to dig through and filter thousands of other people's observations. And eventually, I'm going to try to redefine some of the boundaries within this so that we can sort of limit our observations to only our designated roadsides. I also think a really neat idea is to sort of have a big umbrella project for wildflowers in North Florida, and then sort of have sub-projects underneath that for each individual county. So this is sort of the dream, at least once until we have our North Florida Wildflower Alliance more established. Next slide. And the other tool we're using right now with our Alachua team is Google Maps. This is really great for pinning locations on problem areas that have invasive species or damaged signs, or when you notice mowing inconsistencies from the contractors. So the volunteers on the team have the option to upload their geotagged photos directly to Google Maps or email them to me to upload. And then we also have a spreadsheet with coordinates that can be used as well. And basically we're using these tools to report directly back to Public Works with any issues so they can do management as needed. Next slide. And so just to recap here on what Liz and I discussed, there are multiple ways you can contribute. By joining a team or requesting to be a leader of a wildflower team, you can sign up as a volunteer to establish resolutions in your county and monitor roadsides, which is, it's always just fun to see what's blooming on the sides of the roads at different times of the year. But you also don't need to be tech savvy to volunteer, like Liz mentioned. You can participate simply just by educating and doing outreach to your local community and governments, or simply just by encouraging others to care about roadside wildflowers and pollinators. Next slide. And next, I want to introduce Neil Greshaw. He's going to be talking a bit more about the Alachua Wildflower Program that I just touched on. So Neil is the horticulturist at Alachua County Public Works. He supervises the maintenance unit responsible for vegetation management along approximately 930 miles of county-owned rights-of-way and many other county-owned assets. The Wildflower Program, which kicked off in 2019, also falls under his responsibility. Neil got his start in horticulture as a teenager at Kanapaha Botanical Gardens in Gainesville, picking weeds and digging up bamboo for their annual winter bamboo sale. Since then, he's had a wide range of green industry experience, including rose garden horticulturalist at Lewis Ginter Botanical Garden in his native city of Richmond, Virginia, and commercial landscaping roles. He earned a Bachelor of Science degree in the University of Florida's IFAS Environmental Horticulture Program with a concentration in public gardens management. In his spare time, he enjoys a multitude of activities, with getting lost in nature always at the top of his list. And I'll just add here that Neil has really been fantastic to work with in getting the Wildflower Program established and up and running in Alachua. And he will be talking more about that county program here. So I'll pass it off to Neil now.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Gina, and for everyone for being here and the opportunity, echoing previous speaker. I'm very grateful for this opportunity. I'd like to start out with just the definition, what is a wildflower? I realize I'm preaching to the choir here, but I really liked this definition of a wildflower that I got from the Florida Wildflower Foundation. Every class I ever took, we start off with definitions, and defining a wildflower with a public perspective and perception, as well as upper management. A lot of times people just think plants are weeds. And then how do you define a weed as a plant out of place? Or if it's something that the Exotic Plant Pest Council has determined is an invasive exotic in Florida, that's another definition of a weed for sure. Next slide, please. Why have a wildflower program? We've really already touched a lot about this. And again, I'm preaching to the choir here, but there are so many benefits to wildflowers, ranging from habitat, food, plants in general help moderate climate, improvements to air and water quality, and lastly, they're aesthetic pleasing. Additionally, we've heard before about the decreased mowing cost, which is definitely true. I mean, that's very simple economics. The roadside maintenance in Alachua County is actually funded by our gas tax. So anytime we can do what we can to save money there and be just a steward of the taxes is a good thing. And that was definitely helpful in getting this program kicked off with administration. And also public appreciation and interest. Here in Alachua County with the university and just a lot of people that enjoy nature and wildlife, that was not a hard thing to do here. Next slide, please. So we have several designated wildflower areas, about 54 actually, around 405 acres total land area. Several of these, I heard a previous speaker mention relic populations, and I'll use the word remnant populations. Those are areas, again, like what Liz had mentioned, are by preservation areas, areas where they do natural burns. And we have quite a few of those in Alachua County, which is really cool. We also want to do some potential enhancement opportunities, but again, just changing the cultural practices has really showed us what we already have, a seed bank on the ground and in the right of way. And that's just changing a cultural practice with the mowing and mowing with less frequency and timing. Next slide, please. This is an overall map of Alachua County and shows all of our wildflower areas. And then the next few slides break it down into quadrants. Next slide, please. This is the northeast quadrant of the county. Also to point out, our mowing operators all have map books too of their mowing routes, and they are versed on the wildflower areas and our mowing techniques. Next slide, please. This is the southeast part of the county. There's a lot of diversity in this area and quite a few remnant populations. Next slide, please. This is the southwest quadrant of the county. And last slide. And this is the northwest quadrant as well. Next slide. This goes into some of our details about our cultural practices. And again, this is an evolving process. We're learning from our mistakes and starting off with sign installation. And as much as it was for the public to delineate the locations, it was also for our mowing operators. And then the scheduling and the timing is critical. One thing that we were doing that's a little bit different than what Liz had gone over was ceasing all mowing activities between October and June to allow seed germination. Again, this is still a work in progress, and we're learning a lot from changing these mowing techniques. And we're also saving money by mowing with less frequency. And again, that safety strip and the bottom there, a 6-foot shoulder width will be maintained. And that's per a Green Book design standard. It's also similar to what the state is doing. And that's just tempering this with public safety in case you get a flat tire or any other kind of things that you have a safe place to pull over on the side of the road. Next slide, please. Cultural practices and procedures. We have tried a couple different techniques of some seeding. And then preparing, we've tried a couple different things too by mowing super low, as well as some scraping that we did. These were in some medians, which I'll get to later, where we had to remove the trees that were there to put in crosswalks. And then there's some other seed applications. Next slide, please. Again, we have these remnant populations, and this is a really cool plant. It was a really cool plant. I'm hoping that there's some stuff left over in the seed bank. This is a lady lupine that was in southwest Alachua County. And unfortunately, it got mulched up by a private contractor for utility clearance trimming. And that's a common thing that happens. There's a lot of different entities in the right of ways that have facilities that they're maintaining. And that's where it's important to know who the players are. And I think with good communication, I now know the right-of-way vegetation management staff for the utility company that was in the area where this happened. But just to know who the players are and to work together and emphasize, communication. Next slide, please. Here's a commercially exploited plant, one of the pitcher plants, and it's one of 2 species vouchered in Alachua County. I'm not sure the other one is still here anymore. But this is in one of our roadside areas, and this is a plant that was also getting mowed down for years, and I just happened to be driving by one day and noticed the flowers. So I was really excited to see this plant. This is a hooded pitcher plant. Next slide, please. And some people had already discussed milkweed earlier. These are the two most common species that I see in Alachua County, and both of these were taken in roadsides. Next slide, please. And here's some examples of some pollinator activity. The plant on the left is actually one of our non-native heliotrope species. And there's a painter lady that's on there. So even though it's a non-native plant, it still has pollinator value. And this plant is pretty common in Alachua County. It has not made it on the exotic plant list, which is a good thing. And then there's a buckeye on a very common fleabane plant. And someone had asked me recently, like, does anyone ever see any pollinator activity on these? And less than 5 minutes, I saw a wealth of activity on this plant. So fleabane had a really good season this year. Next slide, please. Spiderwort, that's another plant that certain people that I work with just think of as a weed. And paying attention to some of the populations around Alachua County, I actually found a white flowered specimen. But this is another plant that also has, you know, a lot of pollinator value, as you can see by the honeybee on the picture on the left. Next slide, please. And less common plants. This was a pine lily, again, in one of our remnant population areas. The mowing that was occurring in this area previously, these just never had a chance to grow in the time of the year that they flower, mid to late summer. I was really happy to see this picture with the pollinator activity on it as well. And this is a Kate's Peace lily. Next slide, please. This was a collaboration working together with the Gainesville Garden Club on one of the medians I mentioned previously, where we had to remove trees to install a crosswalk. This seed was just hand spread, and we had a pretty good success on it. I left the county for about 7 months, and in the meantime, it's just weeds that had grown up in there. We did another kind of treatment where we scraped it down and did another hand application, and it looks about this good right now. Next slide, please. This was a new median that we did in another area. It didn't have any trees in it either, so it made sense to put wildflowers, and we tried a different seed mix. There's a Gaillardia there on the right, and then the Coreopsis spacialis. So I was really happy to see some diversity. Again, a lot of people argue that the Gaillardia pulchella is not native anywhere east of Mississippi, but it does have pollinator value. Next slide, please. And this was a very actually washed out, overexposed looking picture that I took last Friday. It was foggy that morning. This is one of our wildflower signs and a wildflower area on 241, County Road 241, which is in the northwest part of Alachua County. But there's a lot of diversity on this hillside. And again, it's just from changing up the mowing technique. Next slide, please. And this was my daughter. She reluctantly took this picture. I had to bribe her with some McDonald's a couple weeks back. And this is one of our wildflower areas. But it's the next generation, and you know, the future is the reason why I feel very passionate about this program and just trying to do something for the future. Thank you for allowing me to present.
Thanks so much, Neil. I personally think everyone should strive to be as awesome as Alachua County. Now I'm going to introduce Cindy Trammell. Cindy is the Deputy District Maintenance Administrator at the Florida Department of Transportation in District 2. Cindy has worked for FDOT for 38 years. In her current role, she oversees the wildflower program for District 2 and is responsible for FDOT's Fleet Management Department, Roadway Characteristics Inventory, the Maintenance Management Systems, and Radio Shop. She earned a bachelor's degree in geology from the University of Florida. In her spare time, she enjoys flower gardening and protecting, preserving, and coexisting with plants and all other creatures in nature. We're really excited to hear from Cindy today. She's going to discuss the wildflower program in regards to FDOT's District 2. And I'll pass it off to you now, Cindy.
Next slide, please, Gina. I was telling Gina in a previous conversation, working with the wildflowers and promoting the wildflowers really isn't work for me because it's such a passion for me. So that's why I call this our carpets of color surrounding our paths of sunshine, being our road right-of-ways. Next slide, please. And what you're seeing here is a map, which Liz spoke about it earlier, the various districts within the Department of Transportation. And our district is District 2, which is the lighter green in the northern central part of the state up there. We have 18 counties in our state, in our district. Next slide, please. And I want to talk to you about the steps that we take here in District 2 to successfully grow wildflowers. And we do both. We cultivate new seed and plant new seed, as well as we promote the existing wildflowers. And when we do go out and plant, we don't go out there and till. Normally what we do is we go in and we mow. We do what we call scalp it. We mow it down very close. And then we come back with a seed drill and we plant our seeds with the seed drill. Next slide, please. Another thing is the DOT, especially District 2, is very committed to our wildflower program. And what you're seeing here is our district secretary, he is the lead engineer for all of our 18 counties. He is actually rated on the success of our wildflower program, and he has 5 different criteria that he's rated on. And the highest score being a 5, so naturally that's what we strive for. And so we try to make sure that we attain every one of these goals to meet the criteria he needs to get a 5. So next slide, please. First of all, one of the criteria is that we have a designated wildflower coordinator, and that person is Larry Porter. And what Larry does is he coordinates with our 6 maintenance yards, and he has contacts in each one of our maintenance yards. And what he does is he coordinates with his contact persons to make sure that when central office, who provides us a portion of our wildflower seeds, he makes sure that they get the seeds that they feel like best suit their needs in their area. He also makes sure that the seeds get to them on time, and then he makes sure that they get them planted on time. And what we do is we strive to plant in the fall. So we usually get our seeds in October, and our goal is to try to have them in the ground by November, but no later than December. Next slide, please. And the second criteria that our district secretary is held to is that we have a wildflower plan. And so we have a documented written wildflower plan every year, so that if something happens that myself or Larry, we're not here, someone has to step in, they can step in and they know what to do, because we try to consistently carry this out through all the 18 counties. Next slide, please. And what you're seeing here is we also document what we do. And this is a spreadsheet. This came out of our Perry maintenance unit, where we document the county, the state road, the location as far as the left or the right side, how much seed, when we planted, and what type of planted, and any other special notes about the planting. And we also have our own designation for our state roads, which is a 5-digit, we call it a roadway ID. So that's what you're seeing there in that column that says section. Every state road has a unique 5-digit number. And so we use that number and what we call a milepost, which is different from a mile marker, to denote the locations, but it's a very efficient way to track it. And then also some of the units use GPS coordinates. Next slide, please. And what this is just showing you a map of, this is Taylor County, showing the roads with our 5-digit roadway ID. And the way the roads are identified and laid out is almost like a number line. And 0 For east-west roads, the 0 is from west to east. So 0 would start on the western end and increase as you move easterly. For north-south routes, 0 is at the southernmost end of the road and increases as you move northerly. And it increases it in increments of 1 mile. So that's why we call them mileposts. Next slide, please. We also document, we document all the information on the seeds that we plant in the beginning, but we also document the outcomes. And we do that by, just documenting on the spreadsheet, as well as we take photographs so that we have them just for our own information, as well as for public information and any type of awards that we're trying to win, like the Paths of Sunshine. Next slide, please. So we can go through all those steps in the beginning, but if we have somebody come along with a mower before the flowers bloom, or they mow them right after they bloom, they never get the opportunity to seed out, then all of our work can be in vain. So another very important step is preventing premature mowing. Next slide. Right now, most of what we do with the DOT, we are 90% contracted out and 10% in-house. And what you're seeing here is a map. We have 2 different types of contracts. We have one type of contract called an asset maintenance contract. And all of our interstates are under what's called asset maintenance. And with an asset maintenance contract, the contractor that wins that contract, they pretty much take care of everything on the road. So they're the ones that are responsible for the mowing and everything. So we have this map so that we know we have to be in contact with who does what. And we're constantly stressing to them the schedules and the wildflowers, preserving the wildflowers. So that's why we keep up with which companies have which asset maintenance contract. The other type of contracts we have for mowing are called work order driven. Those we have a little more control over, because those are run by our maintenance units. So they have a little bit more interaction with those contracts than they do the asset maintenance. But either way, we have to stay on top of it. We have to make sure that they are educated about our wildflower program and our mowing schedules. Next slide, please. And this is the mowing schedule that we try to adhere to presently. I'm really in the process of trying to get it revised slightly. I would like to see the March 1st mowing moved up to February 1st. But even with this particular schedule, we have had a lot of success with our wildflowers, because like Jaret said, we want to manage it. We want to promote the biodiversity, but we don't want to completely stop mowing. And you can see we do maintain the safety strip that Neil was talking about, that they do in Alachua County. But with this particular schedule, we have had a lot of success. We just want to do better. We're always looking to improve. Next slide. So now I want to show you some of our success stories. This was taken this spring. This is US 27 between Mayo and Branford. And if you're on that road right now, you'll see miles and miles of phlox. Next slide. This is also US 27, the lyre-leaf sage. This is between Branford and Fort White. And the reason why we documented this is because it was such a really big patch of the lyre-leaf sage. Most of the time I see it in small patches, in the shade or where the soil's really moist. And this was a very, I would say, close to an 1/8 of a mile stretch of lyre-leaf sage. Next slide, please. This photo was taken This is looking westbound. This is on US 27 as well, looking westbound towards the Itchtuckney River Bridge. And these are primrose. Now the previous two slides were all naturally occurring stands of wildflowers, but this right here, we planted those about 2 years ago, and they are continuing to come back from seed every year, these primrose. Next slide. This is all these slides have also were flowers of this blooming this spring, and this is an area that we planted. This is State Road 47 within the city limits of Lake City. And we planted these bluebonnets about 2.5 years ago, and they are coming back from seed. So we're very pleased with what we're getting here on State Road 47. Next slide. This was taken on I-10 just as eastbound, just as you approach the I-75 interchange. And this was another very large area of forget-me-nots. And one reason why we're having such a success with some of these wildflowers, like the lyre-leaf sage and the forget-me-nots, is the mowing schedule. Next slide, please. This is on I-10. This is in the median of I-10, looking westbound, and it's just past the Wellburn exit, but just totally covered in phlox. This could have been planted years ago. I'm really not sure if it was before my time of being in this job. But every year it comes back just because of the mowing schedules. Next slide. This particular one is one of my favorites. This was taken last year. And what you're looking at, this is downtown Jacksonville. This is MLK Parkway, alternate US 1, and in the background is TIAA Bank Field. So you know what an urban setting this is. And the interesting thing about this, these wildflowers is they span about 3.5 miles. They cover just about every bit of the right of way within that 3.5 mile section. And they were naturally occurring. They got started, as far as we know, and in my tenure here, the seed got deposited there, and it was just perfect soil, and they just took off. And with our mowing schedules being delayed in this early spring, they really just flourished, and we just had an amazing display last year of the Gaillardia. Next slide, please. And here's another shot. You can see just from every bit of green space we had was covered in Gaillardia. Next slide. Here's another one all the way up to the guardrail, just Gaillardia everywhere. Next slide, please. This is another unusual situation that we have. This is a white fringed orchid. It's a very rare orchid, and we didn't actually discover it. The Jacksonville Zoo was the one who actually discovered that we had these orchids on our right of way. So this orchid was found just west of Old Lusty on US 90. So they contacted us, and we agreed to work with them with the mowing schedules and put up signs to protect this orchid. Next slide, please. And not only the white fringed orchid, but this Chapman's fringed orchid, they're both late summer bloomers. So if you're not aware that they're there, our normal mowing schedules we were mowing them down in the past. But now that we've identified them and we don't mow during that time, they're coming back every year, and we're getting a bigger and better showing every year. Next slide, please. And another thing that we've gained in that area by holding off on the mowing is these narrow-leaf sunflowers. We've had them begin to bloom in early fall. So besides the orchids, now we got the narrowleaf sunflowers, another added benefit. Next slide. This particular slide photo was taken in Hamilton County on State Road 6, and this was probably about 5 miles that were just covered in coreopsis. And this was taken last year about the same time, but it was an amazing show of coreopsis. And again, I want to attribute it to our mowing schedules, because allowing them to seed out in the previous year, they just got thicker and just became absolutely gorgeous. Next slide, please. This is another situation of beautiful coreopsis, and this was taken on State Road 26, looking east from Newberry towards Gainesville, and miles, I would say, what, 2 miles? 2 miles probably of solid coreopsis. And again, it just, I attribute it to the mowing. Next slide, please. This particular photo was taken in the infield of County Road 255 and the I-10 interchange in Madison County. And the interesting thing about this photo is the Indian paintbrush that you see in there mixed in with the yellow coreopsis, they were not planted there. So the only thing we can decide is they were transferred on the mower decks from a patch that did occur there naturally at that interchange, but not within the infield. Next slide, please. And this is the naturally occurring patch there. We did not plant it. Somehow some seed got deposited there, and it just happens to be a perfect spot. And I guess just from the mowing there and then moving on into the infield of the interchange, we ended up with not only a beautiful showing right there on the north side of I-10, we ended up with them within the infield of the interchange. So we were very pleased to see that. Next slide, please. And another example of seeds taking hold, just they got deposited and found the right soil, didn't get mowed down, and we have ended up with beautiful, beautiful patches of Gaillardia. And this particular one, this is taken at the I-10 and US 90 interchange, and this is on 90, but at that interchange. And it was taken in the early part of the summer, and the Gaillardia pretty well bloomed most all the summer, all along I-10 and some of the interchanges. Next slide, please. And here again, here's the Gaillardia. This is on the back slope like Liz was talking about, but a great pollinator and gorgeous because it's still visible to the traveling public. A lot of benefit here with the Gaillardia. Next slide, please. This is also I-10. These were also naturally occurring. The standing cypress, the black-eyed Susan, at this particular spot, this is the only one that I know within our district on I-10 where we have the standing cypress, but they do come back every year, and mixed in with the standing cypress, we have the black-eyed Susan. And they are on the back slope, so it allows us to keep as you can see in the picture, the grass is mowed right up to the travel lanes. We've got that safety strip, but the back slopes are thriving with the black-eyed Susan and the standing cypress. Next slide, please. And this is the moss verbena. This is on US 90 going into Live Oak. This is a naturally occurring stand right here of the moss verbena, but we do plant the moss verbena. But we do have a lot of it that is just naturally growing all over our district. And one thing nice about it is once the the phlox and the coreopsis have seeded out, and we do come in and mow. Because the verbena is such a low growing plant, if the mowers are raised up just a little bit, we get a very good cover with the verbena. And not only is it pretty, it's very good for erosion control. Next slide, please. And so basically our goal is, first of all, is safety. And we do try to have a beautiful right of way for the traveling public, but we also want them to be environmentally friendly so that we promote the pollinators and biodiversity. And that's all I have.
Well, thank you, Cindy. Go ahead, Gina.
All right, thank you, Cindy. It's really great to hear about everything that FDOT is doing for roadside wildflowers. I also wanted to add onto Cindy's talk that if you're the leader of your team's county in District 2, you'll likely be working with Cindy and or Larry Porter. But you can always reach out to me or Liz with questions or concerns prior to contacting FDOT as well. Now that we're at the end here, I just wanted to bring it home and talk about how we're officially launching the North Florida Wildflower Alliance in District 2 counties. So there's 18 counties in District 2. So if you're in any of these counties and your county isn't green on the map, we need to set up a wildflower resolution. But as Liz also mentioned previously, there's still a lot of work to be done in counties that are green. So there's definitely no shortage of work. So we definitely want to check on, how old the wildflower resolution is and if there's active work being done in your county. And you can contact me with any questions about how to get started. My contact information, as well as Liz's, is on the last slide that we'll show in a couple slides here. And we're also going to provide guidance and support to you throughout this entire process. So please reach out to us. We're happy to help you. And next slide. And the last thing I wanted to mention was the Panhandle District 3 counties have this beautiful brochure of native wildflowers in the area, as well as a map of wildflower routes and destinations. We're hoping to create something like this for North Florida as well. And the observations that you make in your county may contribute to this guide in North Florida. We also have a Facebook group called North Florida Wildflower Alliance. So please be sure to join that on Facebook if you're in North Florida. And that's it.
Thanks, Gina. And thanks to everybody for presenting and especially for sticking with us through our technical difficulties. I apologize again for that. We have a few minutes for questions, and there are some coming in from the Q&A and some that have already been answered. But one of the ones, this is for Cindy, people are wondering why DOT is not planting more native species on roadsides. If you could address that.
Well, we are promoting the native species, and we do plant native when we can get the seed, but there are times that we just can't get them. They're sold out. But we do plant native. The coreopsis are native. They're one of the most prominent seeds that we plant in phlox. But we do introduce other things like the primrose, and I don't know if you would consider the verbena native or not, but we do plant the verbena. But I would say predominantly we do plant the native seed.
Okay. Another question was that, let's see, why are we focusing on naturally occurring wildflowers? And Liz, maybe you could answer this one.
Sure, yeah. The part of that answer is the naturally occurring ones are sort of exactly what our insect and our whole food chain and our complex pollinator web needs. If you have the native wildflowers, then the native insects, including our 300 plus species of native bees, and they are really the heavy lifters in the pollinator world as far as agriculture and the pollinator services that they provide to adjacent farmers and our food crops. So it's when all possible, and I think Cindy just touched on that, we try to encourage, if there's seeding going on, that it is the native ecotypes, but that's just not always available. There's quite a scarcity of that. So if we just stop mowing down what we've got naturally growing and let the seed bank germinate, we're going to have basically free wildflowers. So that's part of the answer. It's an economic prospect, but it's also to encourage our pollinators.
Okay. There's also any recommendations for encouraging natural wildflowers on roadsides that include deep ditches holding stormwater? Do you have any advice there? Probably Cindy, this would be a great one for you. And then Jaret, maybe you could follow up to talk about what you're doing at stormwater ponds.
Well, we have tried various other, wetland species of wildflowers. And we did have a project where we worked with a young man who was working on his Eagle Scout badge there in Jonesville, where we tried a few different varieties of wildflower seeds. But honestly, most of what we focus on is more of a upland species of wildflower. But we have given it some attention, but for the most part, we're focused more on your full sun upland species of wildflowers. And then, like Liz was saying, that when we hold off on mowing what we already have there naturally, we're getting reseeding from what's there. And so in doing that, we are promoting them as much as we can when we're not coming out there planting new seed.
Well, and this is Jaret. We do have a program in collaboration with the Florida Wildflower Foundation and the Department of Transportation to revegetate retention basins along Florida roadways. And while they're not technically roadsides, they are still maintained by the Department of Transportation. And as you know, there are wet basins and dry basins, and these are kind of off the common grid, if you will, of potential habitat areas. So the goal would be to enhance those so that they become much more diverse for forage, for pollinating insects, for habitat for monarch butterflies and other wildlife. And it's part of a 3-year pilot program, and we're into our 2nd year, and it's so far been very, very successful.
Great, thank you. Let's see what other questions we have here. Got a couple more minutes. How do you identify naturally growing wildflowers when they're mowed every 3 weeks? Jaret, you had answered this in the chat. Liz, if you kind of talk about the process that different counties and volunteer groups are taking, that would be helpful.
Yeah, that is kind of a conundrum. It's like, yeah, how do you find things if they are just constantly cut down? The best, just kind of have to go out there in the different seasons and get out there early before the mowing starts and document what you're seeing. And that's, again, looking next to public conservation lands. That's your most likely places you're going to see good species. Looking at the Florida Natural Areas Inventory records, and see what's growing adjacent there in the conservation lands, and try to get out and document it when it's early. And using iNaturalist is a great tool. It's kind of like carrying a bunch of field guides in your pocket. So if you're lucky, you may be getting some good feedback and suggestions of what you're seeing.
Okay, and is there a plan to engage the public and showcase locations of roadside wildflowers. Are there maps available in PDF? In other counties, like we have our Panhandle map. Maybe Liz and Gina, you could take this one.
Gina, you want to talk about the iNaturalist, the function of that and our intention for that?
Sure. Yeah, I think, once we have a lot of observations on iNaturalist, it might be sort of a neat idea to do a wildflower tour with iNaturalist. So when you open up the app, if you're not familiar, you'll sort of see a map, especially if you're looking in a specific area. So you can see a bunch of observations around you and be able to sort of click on different pins and see what was blooming at that specific pin. And eventually, like I mentioned before, we want to create a map and as well as a brochure for the North Florida District 2 counties, similar to what we did for the Panhandle. So that's something that's going to be in the works. And like I mentioned also, I think by contributing a lot of these observations to iNaturalist, we'll be able to combine everybody's observations. What are the most common wildflowers? What should be included in the guide, and sort of create the guide from there.
I wanted to add something too. I don't think I heard this mentioned, but iNaturalist will also, if there's a listed species, it will throw a filter around it. So you'll not be able to encourage poaching if we, finding like pitcher plants along the road or something. So you can feel comforted by that. Like it will indicate that a species was found within like a 6-kilometer circle, but it won't geolocate it and pin it and have people find it exactly. So that's a safety feature. And iNaturalist is really a wonderful, it's sort of leading the pack for all the apps because it's such valuable data for land managers and scientists. They can see all sorts of peninsular effects and species creep from climate change, and just all sorts of wonderful data can be seen from your observations. So it's pretty much become the leading citizen science app. And I think that we're going to have a lot of good data come from it, and it'll help inform our products that we make, including a paper map in the future. But this is going to take some years to do because we got to get resolutions passed and get some roadsides preserved. It took quite a long time for that to happen in District 3 up in the Panhandle. So this is, again, something that collectively we'll all be working towards. So we appreciate anybody that wants to help with this project.
Yep, next slide. Yeah, and that is a great point. We need your help in doing this. We depend on volunteers. We have about 500 to 600 people up in the Panhandle who are engaged in this effort. We need the same number of people, if not more. It's a lot of territory to cover in North Florida. So you can help us grow by joining this effort. As you're leaving the webinar, there'll be a form to sign up. Also, you can help us by supporting our work. Go to flawildflowers.org/support. If you have the license plate, or if you want the license plate, you'll be able to fill out a form and get a phone call to get it. Every $15 comes to us, and we spend it for research, education, and planting native wildflowers. But again, thank you for joining us today. We're going to end it now. And if you have questions, be sure to send them to us at info@flawildflowers.org.